To Prof. Sanchez and to the science teachers virtually present today, good afternoon. Let me start my presentation with a government warning that we are all familiar about. This one, smoking kills. This is not new. We have known the dangers of smoking for decades. But how exactly do smoking harms us? Well, people all know that every time you smoke a cigarette, toxic gases pass through your respiratory tract, enter your lungs, then into your bloodstream, and the field trip goes on. And that is a fact. My name is Paolo Alburo. I'm a bio major, and my talk is centered on tobacco-specific carcinogens. This discussion is outlined into first, the definition of carcinogen, second, tobacco as a known carcinogen, third, carcinogen-related epidemiology, and fourth, we will explore a bit of tobacco research and public policy. To begin, what makes a carcinogen, or how do we technically define a carcinogen? Tobacco use is actually the world's leading cause of preventable death that results in nearly 6 million each year, and that is a big number. In the Philippines, a survey was conducted. It's the Global Adult Tobacco Survey conducted in year 2015 by DOH and PSA. Um, it actually resulted, or they reported 22.7% of adults, roughly 15.9 million Filipinos who are currently tobacco smokers. And based on the study, the daily cigarette smokers consume an average of 11 cigarettes per day. And based on this number, it's actually 40.3% among the men population who are smokers and 5.1% among women population. Another cross-sectional survey was conducted among students in school ages 13 to 15 years old among 61 countries, including the Philippines. This is published in the National Library of Medicine. They actually reported 14.5% of the sample size were smokers. And imagine, these are students. The results actually showed significant higher number among males than females. But good thing here is that 90% of these students desire to quit smoking. So what really makes a carcinogen? A carcinogen. So according to the National Human Genome Research Institute, a carcinogen is an agent with the capacity to cause cancer in humans. It may be natural or man-made. Natural, like the residues of plant biosynthesis, or man-made, such as asbestos or tobacco smoke. Carcinogens work by interacting with a cell's DNA and inducing genetic mutations. These genetic alterations are very evident in published journals. One of the studies published in the National Library of Medicine, this article is from Binma and colleagues. They actually described how a particular carcinogen from tobacco have an impact on the normal functioning of the DNA. According to this paper, DNA adducts are compounds formed when carcinogens react with DNA. And tobacco smoke-related DNA adducts were detected in human samples, oral cavity, esophagus, lung, and nasal cavity. The paper actually provided a visual representation on how carcinogenic compounds from tobacco smoke affects the normal functioning of the DNA. Based on the illustration, upon exposure of the normal DNA carcinogenic compounds from tobacco smoke, it will actually form DNA adducts. Or in layman's term, these DNA adducts are just damaged DNA because of the exposure to these carcinogens. Once these are exposed and become damaged, it will actually result to persistent mutation, persistent error in DNA replication, especially in inhibition of tumor suppression genes. That would eventually lead to carcinogenesis, resulting to carcinoma or the tumor itself. So tobacco is already a known carcinogen. Based on the recent studies, There are a lot of carcinogenic compounds that a person or a single smoker can inhale out of it in a single combustion of tobacco products. While tobacco has been used in various forms around the world for many years, and these are believed to have been growing as far back as 6000 BC. Well, in the 1500s, it was not considered as a carcinogenic material. This tobacco was actually considered a medicinal herb that is anti-diarrheal, narcotic, and pain reliever. However, as scientific evidences progressed and the talk of the town began when it comes to cancer, little by little, it's already recognized that tobacco is a potential source of carcinogenic compounds. So there was a shift of history from being a medicinal herb into a full-fledged carcinogen, which is the world is recognizing now. So according to Stanfield of 2020, a newly planted tobacco generally contains low levels of carcinogenic agents. What actually happens is a fresh harvested plant doesn't actually contain that much of the carcinogenic agents. It actually happens during the post-processing after harvest. And it is worsened more when it is burned or it undergoes combustion, when it's already consumed by the smokers. The main alkaloid found in tobacco is nicotine, according to Constantino 2018. Nicotine is a toxic, addicting, and stimulating alkaloid that's found in nicotine. That is one of the reasons why the smokers do have the problem on how to quit from smoking once they're already into it. There are recent studies that are saying that nicotine isn't really a carcinogenic material. However, it is a cancer culprit, which means that it is the one who is stimulating other compounds to react with carcinogenic agents, meaning nicotine is like a cancer, no, a carcinogen helper in promoting carcinogenesis in smokers. With over 5,300 compounds have been identified in tobacco smoke, over 70 known carcinogens have been described from Sinhavi of 2018. That's a lot. That's a lot of inorganic compounds that a smoker is inhaling in every one inhalation from the cigarette smoke. And that is so sad. And in every inhalation of cigarette smoke, these are the compounds that a person is inhaling. The PAH, which is very common, the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, tobacco-specific nitrosamines, aromatic amines, aldehydes, and volatile organics. Among all of these compounds present or described from a tobacco smoke, the PAH and the TSNA are the widely described or widely studied. A study from Stephen Stanfield from the US CDC is reducing carcinogen levels in smokeless tobacco products. This paper actually proved that a fresh and tobacco plant doesn't contain a lot of carcinogenic agents. So the bad thing actually happens from post-processing. So carcinogens in tobacco may result from accumulation in soil metals, nitrate, plant biosynthesis of alkaloids, byproducts of microbial activity, residues from fire curing, or additives, which increases nicotine absorption. In this paper, it also described that the manner on how a specific tobacco is planted or the place where it is cultivated actually do have an effect on the nicotine level, not only nicotine but the other carcinogenic agents present on the tobacco product. Based on this study, tobacco accumulates inorganic agents from the soil since it's cultivated. In countries like Pakistan, India, and Ghana actually had a higher level of metals than those of Canada, United States, and Sweden. This paper actually suggested for clients or for consumers to have less amount of carcinogenic compounds that will be ingested into the body through smoking is to consume tobacco from other countries with less carcinogenic compounds detected out of the product. So let us talk about the carcinogen-related epidemiology or the health sciences part on how these carcinogenic compounds do have an effect on our body, especially on the molecular level. Here in the Philippines, there is a study, two studies conducted by different doctors. This is from UP Manila and from DOH that they actually did a survey on the cancer incidence and survival in Metro Manila and the Rizal province. This is in 2010, and the smoking attributable burden of lung cancer in the Philippines. Both of these studies are very important in cancer incidence rate and survival rate determination in the Philippines. According to this paper, overall lung cancer incidence had increased in both males and females. And among males, lung cancer was the leading cancer and reached a peak in 1988 to 1992. This is very true because on the numbers we had from the GATS Philippines, men are smoking a lot as compared to women. That's based on the survey. Lung cancer incidence in females also reached a peak by 1998 to 2002, and then it slightly decreased. And for 2008, lung cancer incidence and mortality estimates were more than 10,000 and more than 9,000 deaths recorded. And that is a big number. The survival rates among Philippine residents were one-third lower than among Filipino residents as compared to the Filipino Americans or whites in the USA, especially if they do have cancers which there is an effective early detection available. So the healthcare management here in the Philippines actually comes in that low survival equates to poor healthcare services. Another paper published in PubMed also. This is a comparative study between the lung cancer incidence in young women versus young men. The results of this, when I'm reading this, the results were shocking because it's actually different to those results coming from the Philippines or from other journals. Based on the statistics conducted by the DOH and the PGH, men are more at risk of lung cancer since they are smoking more than women based on population survey. However, in this paper, in this international study, the lung cancer rates have declined among younger men but are rising among younger women, even though these women are not smoking more than men. And this is one of the questions on why there is a skyrocketing number of LC or lung cancer rates in women since they are not generally smoking as compared to men. So in this paper, they actually reviewed that maybe it's more of environmental tobacco smoke, or they call the ETS, aside as a factor of indirect smoking. So this findings projects a higher lung cancer burden among women in the future, and factors causing the higher incidence burden among younger women shall be studied. So the paper actually cited for future reference to include what are the factors and why there is a skyrocketing number of women risk when it comes to lung cancer. Another is this is a comparative modeling approach. This is a projected research from the US CDC, and this is about the smoking and lung cancer mortality in the United States. And it actually shows that smoking will still continue to be an important determinant of lung cancer risk during this century. Smoking as still a well-known carcinogenic um, hobby will still be part of mortality in the United States in the 21st century. And according to this paper, 4.4 million deaths from lung cancer are still projected to occur in the United States from 2015 to 2065, with about 20 million adults aged 30 to 84 years continuing to smoke in 2065. And that now comes with the effective smoking management strategies and how people can do smoking cessation, as what the scientists would actually recommend that quitting is the best option. However, smoking cessation or abstention is not the option for everyone because of the mental burden that is caused as a result of nicotine addiction. However, there are already introduced replacement therapies like the e-cigarettes that is available in the market for these people to quit from traditional cigarette smoking to have a shift into a more lesser number of carcinogenic compounds like the replacement therapy in e-cigarettes. So now let's try to talk about the carcinogenicity of the PAHs, which is one of the most common carcinogenic compounds present in tobacco smoke. This paper, published in Seminars in Cancer Biology, which they tried to describe the molecular mechanisms of pulmonary carcinogenesis by the PAHs and the implications for human lung cancer. According to the paper, PAHs are a class of chemicals that are produced when tobacco is burned, and people are still exposed to tobacco in their everyday life through smoke exposure. And there are two different types: either direct exposure, you are the ones who are smoking, directly inhaling the compounds from the cigarette, or through indirect secondhand smoke. Carcinogenic compounds react with DNA to form DNA adducts which contribute to inhibit pulmonary suppression linked to pulmonary carcinogenesis. This is related to the study that we talked earlier on DNA adducts and the formation of DNA damage due to exposure to carcinogens that will potentially inhibit tumor suppression and will have persistent DNA errors, especially in DNA replication, histone development, and uncoiling of DNA, which is very important in DNA normal functioning. That would eventually lead to pulmonary carcinogenesis, ending up to have lung carcinoma, adenocarcinoma, or squamous cell carcinoma, and all of those related to lung cancer. PAH exposure may further contribute to pulmonary carcinogenesis by producing epigenetic alterations. These epigenetic alterations are the ones that I mentioned, the one with persistent miscoding, errors in DNA replication, histone malformation, and all of those that would eventually alter the normal functioning of a DNA. So let's talk about carcinogenicity of tobacco-specific nitrosamines, or the TSNA. That is also a carcinogenic compound that is derived from a burnt tobacco smoke. A study from Constantino 2018. This is a literature review that they did. Based on this paper, nicotine is a secondary amine responsible for the formation of nitrosamine specific to tobacco smoke. This is the same paper, but they mentioned that nicotine is not generally considered a carcinogenic agent, but it is a cancer culprit, meaning it can actually contribute or trigger other compounds to be exposed with the DNA, forming DNA adducts, thus ending to pulmonary carcinogenesis. Most TSNA are formed in tobacco during the post-harvest period, while a number are produced when a cigarette is burned. So, in cigarette smoking addiction, the combustion or the burning of the product really do have a great effect in the carcinogenic activity of the tobacco product. So that is why there is an invention of liquid nicotine replacement therapy through e-cigarettes. Since there is no combustion, it's just heated. According to them, it's just heated but not burned. And there is and that particular replacement therapy is also supplying the smaller amounts of nicotine just to have a continuous lesser amount of nicotine that they are exposed to prior to the therapy. Several studies have reported that certain TSNA have been detected in the replacement liquids of vapor of e-cigarettes, but generally considerably lower than those of the cigarettes, the traditional cigarettes. So as what I mentioned, that the e-cigarette replacement therapy would actually have less carcinogenic agents according to research, but it is only a very good substitute to those people who are into traditional cigarette smoking and they want to have want to go back to a healthier life by slowly quitting from it because the e-cigarette replacement therapy was made for them so that they will have or they will be exposed to a lesser amount of carcinogenic compounds as compared to the traditional cigarette smoke. However, this paper also reviewed that the e-cigarette replacement therapy is not a good substitute for traditional cigarettes for those people who are not hard smokers, meaning they will be trying to smoke for the first time. So it's still carcinogenic compounds are still present, but in minimal amounts as compared to the traditional ones. So I think this is the last part of my topic, um, the tobacco research and public policy. I really included this one so that we can touch a bit of business economics and for this topic to be more integrated to other disciplines. Um, this is a study from cancer prevention research on the comparison of exposure to VOCs and other toxic compounds. They actually compared the VOCs that a person is receiving from vaping, smoking, and cessation or abstention. The concentrations of VOC metabolites were higher during smoking compared to vaping, and most of the journals actually do agree to this one, that traditional smoking would really give you a lot of carcinogenic compounds as compared to vaping, because in the first place, vaping doesn't need burning. So it's only heated, and the ingredients are far better than the traditional ones if you want to go quitting. And e-cigarettes expose users to low levels of toxic VOCs compared to cigarette smoking. And this is very good. And these e-cigarettes are invented for those people who want to join the party of no smoking. So it's not the e-cigarettes are not invented for those people who want to smoke for the first time. These e-cigarettes are made for those hard smokers who want to be out of the number of smokers in the Philippines or in the world. The findings of this study support the harm reduction potential of e-cigarettes for smokers, but also suggest that e-cigarettes may have deleterious effects on non-smoking. This data is far similar to the previous research that the e-cigarettes would be good in some sort for those hard smokers who want to have lesser amount of carcinogenic compounds for replacement therapy, and then after that they will be um, smoking cessation or quit or total quitting from the hobby, but it doesn't give or provide this assurance that it will not be carcinogenic in the long run for those non-smokers who'll be trying to smoke for the first time. Another study conducted in the Annals of Internal Medicine, this is a cross-sectional study from Dr. Shahab and friends, that according to them, former smokers with long-term e-cigarettes only or nicotine replacement therapy only use may obtain roughly similar levels of nicotine compared with smokers of combustible cigarettes only, but results varied. One of the goals of the e-cigarette or NRT is for the person to receive the same amount of nicotine, acceptable level in pharmaceuticals, that will actually help him to quit. Because if a person is a smoking addict or a heavy smoker, it is not medically advisable to let the person quit right away, because there will be effects like physiological and mental to the patient. So long-term NRT only and e-cigarette only use is associated with substantially reduced levels of measured carcinogens and toxins relative to smoking only combustible cigarettes. And however, this paper revealed that the long-term health effects of the NRT or the e-cigarette remains to be established on what are the possible side effects of using e-cigarettes and NRT in the long run. Um, This paper is published in Oxford Academic that the tobacco control and gender in Southeast Asia, and this is for Malaysia and the Philippines. According to this paper, being born male is the single greatest risk marker for tobacco use, since most of the surveys, men dominate the smoking statistics. So most of the smokers are men. And tobacco taxes serve as primarily as revenue rather than as a deterrent in the Philippines, and which is very true that warning labels on cigarette packages are voluntary, and even minors may freely buy or sell it. So this now comes to, on the topics in the society, on how the government would try to minimize or limit these children, especially the minors, the youth, or the students, would try to buy and sell cigarettes because they can't really do so. The biggest public campaign has been Yossi Kadire, which is slang for cigarettes are disgusting, that are actually um, targeted at youth, launched in 1994 by the DOH. I think this is the last paper that we will review. This is from the DLSU Business and Economics Journal. This paper actually described what are the effects of the syntax law. The syntax law on increasing the price of cigarettes and other alcoholic beverages so that they can minimize the consumption. So this paper, the results are consistent with existing studies that cigarette consumption is price inelastic. I tried to review what does an elasticity mean. Elasticity means that it is actually how the market responds to inflation, or how the market responds to particular abrupt change in prices of particular goods. So this paper reported that the change in the prices of the cigarettes doesn't actually affect the cigarette consumption generally, because still smokers would do find ways in order to, you know, buy and consume the cigarettes, even though the price drastically went up. There is decrease in consumption by smokers. Smoking intensity accounts for much of the decline in cigarette consumption rather than decrease in number of cigarette users or smoking prevalence. According to this paper, there is a decrease in the consumption of, of cigarettes by the smokers, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there is decrease in the number of cigarette smokers. So that's smoking intensity and smoking prevalence. So there is no like difference between, the smoking intensity decreased, but the number of smokers did not decrease. It's the only thing that differs is the consumption because of the syntax law. So that ends my discussion on tobacco specific carcinogens. Thank you so much for listening and have a good one.